Hey everyone, welcome back to Phoebe's Cozy Corner. Tonight we are going to be finishing the first essay in Charles Baudelaire's Artificial Paradises. Hey cat. Augustus is hanging out with us right now. And we are currently on section 3, and if you're following along in this edition, it's going to be page 13 right here. So grab a mug, a beer. In current circumstances, I can't blame you. Cozy up with a blanket and any furry friends you may have nearby, and let's get into it. On Wine and Hashish, Section 3. Now certainly I have not told you anything very new. Wine is known to all, admired by all. One day a truly philosophical physician, something that is rarely seen, will write an authoritative study on wine, kind of double psychological profile in which wine and man make up at least the two subjects. He will explain how and why certain beverages immeasurably augment the personality of the being, thinking and creating, as it were, a third person, through the mystical operation thereby which natural man and wine, the animal god and the vegetal god, representing the Father and Son and the Trinity, combine to engender a Holy Ghost, the superior man, who proceeds equally from the two. The restorative benefits of wine course so powerfully through the veins of some people that their legs become stronger and their sense of hearing becomes excessively acute. I knew of one individual who found that when he was drunk, his feeble eyesight fully regained its original penetrating powers. Wine made an eagle of them all. As an unknown author once expressed it, nothing equals the joy of a man who drinks unless it be the joy of the wine being drunk. Saucy. To be sure, wine and man are intimately allied, so intimately, in fact, that I am not surprised to learn that some reasonable souls, seduced by the idea of pantheism, endow wine with a sort of personality. Wine and man are more like two friends who always follow every argument with a reconciliation. The winner always embraces the loser. There are disagreeable drunkards. These are people who are naturally disagreeable, however. The bad individual becomes execrable as the good becomes excellent. I shall soon speak of a substance which has been fashionable now for several years, a delicious type of drug which is favored by a certain class of dilettante, on whom it acts with effects which are just as explosive as those of wine, although of an extremely different nature. I will carefully delineate its actions, and again, illustrating the various efficacies of wine, I will compare these two artificial means by which man provokes his personality, so as to speak into creating a sort of divinity within himself. I will illustrate the disadvantages of hashish, not the least of which is its antisocial nature, in spite of the treasures of incomparable benevolence it seems to sow in man's heart, or rather brain, in contrast to wine, which is profoundly human, and, I almost venture to say, tantamount to a man of action. Section 4. Hashish. When hemp is harvested, the gatherers, both male and female, at times experience certain strange phenomena. They say that a curious species of vertiginous spirit rises up from the crops to circle round their legs before mounting up maliciously to the brain. The harvester's head begins to spin, becomes heavy and charged with dreams. The limbs grow weak and refuse to serve. I can assure you that this is so, for I myself experienced similar phenomena when I was a child, and I rolled among stacks of cut alfalfa. Although there have been attempts to make hashish from French hemp, these efforts have to date entirely failed. The enthusiasts who would procure the magical delights of this substance at any price have continued to seek out hashish from which is crossed the Mediterranean, that is, hashish made from Indian or Egyptian hemp. The compound of hashish is prepared from a decoction of Indian hemp, butter, and a small quantity of opium. We have before us a morsel of uniquely scented green paste. Its smell, indeed, is so powerful that it gives rise to certain revulsion, as do, for that matter, all fine scents when concentrated to their maximum strength, and, so to speak, density. Take a spoonful, a portion the size of a nut, and happiness is yours, absolute happiness with all of its exquisite pleasure, all of its youthful folly, and all of its infinite rapture. Happiness is yours in this small bit of foul paste. Take it, have no fear, you will not die of it, your internal organs will not be harmed. It may, perhaps, weaken your resolve, but that is another matter. Generally, for the hashish to reach its full potency and force, it must be taken on an empty stomach, dissolved in a cup of very hot black coffee. Dinner must be missed or at least delayed until 10 o'clock or midnight. Then a very light soup alone is tolerable. Infraction of this most simple rule will either cause vomiting, as the drug and the meal vie with each other, or will render the hashish ineffective. When this happens, many novices and imbeciles accuse the drug of lacking power. As soon as the substance has been absorbed, an operation which requires some resolution of will, for, as I will have said, the mixture's smell is so powerful that it can cause bouts of nausea in some people, you will find yourself suddenly gripped by a certain inexplicable anxiety. You will have heard many of the vague rumors of the marvelous effects of hashish. Your imagination has formed an image of the ideal intoxication, and you are burning to know if the reality will measure up to your expectations. Poor Baudelaire didn't have Arrowwood. The length of time between the absorption of the drug and the onset of the first symptoms will vary according to the individual temperament and habit. People who are acquainted with hashish will frequently begin to experience, after half an hour, the first symptoms of the invasion. I neglected to mention that, as hashish will heighten a man's personality while at the same time acutely sharpening his senses, it is advisable to yield to its influence only in the most favorable circumstances and in pleasant surroundings. Set and setting, Baudelaire. Just for personal context here, I'm pretty straight and narrow. I'm not straight edge, because I'm a smoker. But I do not endorse by any means what he's saying in here, just for the record. Back to hashish. Hi, cat. Every delight, every contentment is magnified, and every pain, every anguish is intensely and sharply felt. Do not dare venture such an experience if you have some disagreeable business to conclude. If your mood is exceptionally dark, or if you have bills to pay, as I have said, hashish renders a man incapable of action. It possesses none of the consoling benefits of wine. Its only action is to immeasurably expand the human personality within the circumstances in which it is placed. You should, as far as possible, arrange to be an attractive apartment or a landscape garden with a few accomplices whose intellectual temperaments are similar to your own. Your mind should be clear and calm. A little music, too, is desirable. At their first initiation, novitates frequently complain that the drug is too slow to act. Impatiently awaiting its first effects, they utter cries of incredulity when these effects fail to appear quickly enough, much to the delight of those who are acquainted with the ways in which hashish manifests its presence. It is most amusing to see the first symptoms appear and multiply in the very midst of this incredulity. At first you are seized by an irresistible, ridiculous joy. The most common words, the simplest ideas, take on a bizarre, new meaning. This merriment is more than you can bear, but all efforts to resist it will prove to be futile. The demon has invaded you. It's like salvia. and any struggle you mount will only serve to accelerate the progress of the affliction. You laugh at your idiocy and your madness. Your friends, too, also laugh at you, but you make no attempt to stop them. A gentle benevolence has now seized your spirit. This languid merriment, this anxious delight, this insecurity and indecision which has been induced by the malady, lasts but for a short time. It sometimes happens that people thoroughly inept at word plays improvise interminable strings of puns, connect completely unrelated ideas, and dream up such deeds as to perplex even the strongest masters of this absurd art. Several moments later, the bonds of unison between you and your ideas grow so vague and so frail that the thread that ties your conceptions so tenuous that only your accomplices, your co-religionists, can understand you. Your demonstrations of giddy cheer and uncontrolled laughter seem like the height of madness to the man who does now not share your condition. The prudence of this unfortunate soul cheers you immeasurably. His detachment pushes you beyond the limits of irony. Beyond the limits of irony. He seems to you to be the maddest, the most absurd of men. As for your comrades, you understand them perfectly, and soon engage them in mute dialogues. Here, then, we have a comical situation as you delight in sensations of rapture that are incomprehensible to those who are outside of your world. They are regarded... Sleepy. It's cozy time for me too, guys. They are regarded with the profoundest pity. From this moment, the idea of your superiority dawns on your mind's horizon, soon to expand immeasurably. Now, as to this first stage, I once witnessed two scenes of a strangely grotesque nature. A celebrated musician, who knew nothing experimentally of hashish, and who perhaps knew it not even by name, arrived in the midst of a party where almost everyone was under its sway. They tried to convey to him something of its marvelous effects. He laughed gracefully like a man willing to be tolerant for a few moments because he was polite. They all laughed because those whose senses have yielded to hashish are, in this first stage, endowed with a marvelous comic sense. The wild demonstrations of joy, the incomprehensible outrages, the unfathomable puns, the baroque gestures, all continued. The musician declared that this extravagance could not be good for an artist, and that it must, moreover, be quite exhausting for all involved. The joy redoubled. "This extravagance may be good for you, but it doesn't suit me in the least," said the musician. "It suits us, but that's all that matters," one of the afflicted egotistically replied. Bursts of idiotic laughter filled the room. Our man was offended and wished to leave, but the door was locked and someone had removed the key. Another man dropped to one knee before the musician, tearfully declaring that of all present company felt the deepest pity for him, despite his inferiority. They begged him to play, and he reluctantly agreed. Sincerely, and scarcely had the first note sounded when the tones of the violin spread throughout the room, gripping the first one and another of the inflicted. So charged did the atmosphere become with sobs and sighs, rending cries and torrents of tears, that the frightened musician, thinking he was in a madhouse, set down his instrument. He approached the man, who seemed most caught in the grips of blissful tremors, and asked him if he was suffering much, and if so, what might be done to ease the pain. Another helpful soul, who had also refrained from tasting the beatific drug, suggested soda and bitters. The afflicted man, his eyes brimming over with ecstasy, looked at him with an unutterable scorn. Only pride saved him from taking serious offense. Indeed, what is more likely to offend an enraptured man than the suggestion that he be cured of his bliss? Here we have a curious phenomena. A servant was A servant was sent to buy tobacco and refreshments for a gathering at which everyone had taken hashish. When she returned, she found herself surrounded by bizarre heads with staring eyes. Then, as if enslaved by that malevolent atmosphere of collective madness, she uttered a wild laugh and fled panic-stricken from the room. The next day she explained that, for the duration of several hours, she had been subject to the most extraordinary sensations. The feeling had been very odd, as she said, and was totally different than from anything she'd ever experienced before. And yet, she had not used hashish. The second stage is heralded by a feeling of coldness in the extremities and a vague oppression which seizes your drowsed senses. Your fingers turn, as they say, to butter. Your head grows heavy, and a general numbness pervades your entire being. Your eyes grow abnormally large, as if pulled by an implacable ecstasy. Your countenance pales, turns livid and green. Your lips recede and can retract, seeming to disappear within your mouth. Deep, hoarse sighs escape your chest as if your old nature could not bear the weight of your new nature. Your senses become extraordinarily acute. Your eyes pierce the infinite. Your ears clearly distinguish the slightest sounds amidst the most discordant din. Then the hallucinations begin. External things, forms and images, swell to monstrous proportions, revealing themselves in fantastic shapes as yet to be imagined. Instantly passing through a variety of transformations, they enter your being, or rather you enter theirs. Yeah. The most singular ambiguities, the most inexplicable transpositions of ideas take place in your sensations. Sound holds color, color holds music, musical notes become numbers and your resolve with an astonishing rapidity, prodigious arithmetical For anyone new to this channel, by the way, I have a learning disability. I'm just going to say arithmetics. Arithmetics, calculations, and time to the music that swells in your ears. You are seated, smoking a pipe. You think that you are sitting inside the pipe, but the pipe, rather, is smoking you. Ooh. You exhale yourself in spirals of blue clouds. You feel fine, but your mind is obsessed by this one, though. How will you get out of your pipe? These fancies last an eternity. An interval of lucidity allows you to glance, though not without great effort, at the clock. Eternity has lasted for exactly 1 minute. You are then borne off on another current, which holds you in the wave of its living whirlpool, and at this moment, too, seems to last an eternity. The proportions of time and existence are distorted by the crowded confusion of your feelings and the intensity of your ideas. You live several lifetimes in the space of an hour. Clearly, this is the subject of Leopold, the accord between the senses and their pleasures is broken. The individual's conscious nature disappears from time to time. Objectivity, which has produced a number of pantheistic poets and all of great actors, assumes such force that your confused perceptions cannot distinguish you from being that of others. You are the tree that sighs in the wind, singing to nature's vegetal melodies. Now you soar in azure heavens grown immense, and grief has vanished. You are born without a struggle. You have suffered the loss of self-command, but this you cannot regret. Soon the idea of time will completely vanish. Brief spells of lucidity still occur at intervals. You seem to have then left a marvelous, fantastic world. True, you still possess the faculty of self-observation, and tomorrow you will have retained the memory of your sensations. But the ability to apply this psychological faculty will be beyond your reach. I defy you to sharpen your either pen or quill or pencil. These actions would be beyond your capabilities. At other times, music recites you infinite poems or places within frightening or fantastic dramas. Harmony and melody become inextricably linked with the objects around you. Paintings upon the ceiling, even the most mediocre or dismal, take on a startling life of their own. A limpid, enchanting river winds through a field of trembling flowers. Nymphs with gleaming skin gaze at you with immense eyes clearer than water or sky. You take your place and play your part in the most wretched paintings, in the coarsest scenes painted on the walls of the most common man's rooms. I have before suggested that for those who are artistically inclined, water takes on a disturbing charm when illuminated by hashish. Waterfalls, babbling jets of water, harmonious cascades, and the blue expanses of the sea will sing, flow, and sleep in the innermost depths of your mind. It would be, perhaps, less than wise to permit a man in such a condition to linger on the banks of some still pool. Like the fisherman in the ballad, he might allow himself to be carried off by the Undine. Toward the end of the evening you might venture a light meal, but this operation is not easily accomplished. You are so far above the material world that it would be certainly preferable to linger in the depths of your intellectual paradise. It sometimes happens, however, that a voracious hunger develops in an extraordinary way, and yet great courage is needed to simply lift a bottle, fork, or knife. I'm sorry. I have a very itchy nose at the moment. I hate it when that happens. The third stage, separated from the second by a new bout of uneasiness, is something which defies description. It is what Orientals term kif, the state of perfect bliss. No longer do storms and tempests trouble your senses. This is a calm, immobile happiness. All philosophical problems are solved. All of the secrets about which theologians have grappled and which have been the despair of human understanding now appear transparent and clear. All contradiction is resolved. Man becomes God. There is a voice within you that says, "You are superior to all humanity. No one understands what you are thinking, what you are experiencing at this moment. They could not even begin to understand the great love that you feel for them, but they should be pitied for this, not despised. Immense vistas of happiness and virtue stretch before you. No one can imagine the extent of your virtue or the power of your intellect. Live within your solitary thoughts and avoid distressing your fellow man. You will experience, as one of the more grotesque effects of hashish, the fear of causing any human being the least pain of mortification, a fear which is pushed into a madness of meticulous extremes. You would even disguise, if you could, the exalted state you are in to avoid causing the slightest offense. For the gentle, artistic soul, this is the supreme state. Love assumes the most unusual forms and lends itself to the most startlingly baroque combinations. A wild lustiness may mingle with tender, gentle, paternalistic sentiments. My final observation will not be the least curious. When the first rays of daylight enter your room, your first sensation is one of profound astonishment. Time stands fixed. A moment ago it was night, and now it is day. Have I slept? Have I slept all night in an intoxicated slumber that surpassed the notion of time, so that the entire night seems to have passed in the space of a second? Or rather, was I caught in the veil of a sleep crowded with visions? This is a matter which cannot be determined. You seem to be endowed with a marvelous lightness, and sense of well-being. Oh no, it's happening again. I'm sorry, I'm having an allergic reaction to something. I'm fine. You seem to be endowed with a marvelous lightness and a sense of well-being, and you are not the least bit tired. But no sooner than you have risen to your feet than a new bout of intoxication grips you. Your enfeebled legs carry you timidly, and you are afraid that, should you fall, you would shatter like some fragile object. A vast languor, not without charm, settles over your mind, an indolence which prevents you from endeavoring any intellectual labor or action. This is the punishment that you deserve for having so carelessly and with such impious prodigality spent your vital energies. Your personality, of which you have cast to the four winds, can only be regained by the greatest efforts of will. 5. I am not asserting that hashish produces in all men all the effects that I have described here. I have more or less recounted the phenomena generally produced, except for a few variations among individuals of artistic and philosophical bent. But there are others in whom the drug raises only a raucous madness, a violent merriment resembling vertigo, which brings on dancing, jumping, and wild laughter. These individuals have, so to speak, a completely physical hashish. They are intolerable to the spiritualists who profoundly pity them. Their vile personalities can give rise to scandal. Ooh. Sounds like someone has had a negative run-in with a physicalist hashisher. Imbiber. Indulger? Something along those lines. And I pity them. I once saw a respectable judge, an honorable man, as society people are fond of saying, one of those men who clothe themselves in artificial seriousness suddenly launch into the most indecent can as soon as the hashish invaded him. This is the interior, truthful monster you awakened. This man who judged the actions of his peer, this Solon, had secretly learned to dance the can-can. Good for him. Hence it appears that this impersonality of which I have spoken, this objectivity, which is nothing more than the extreme development of the poetic mind, is never found in the hashish of these aforementioned types. In Egypt, the government prohibits the sale and trade of hashish, at least within the country's own borders. The poor souls who have succumbed to this passion visit the pharmacist under the pretext of purchasing another medication in order to collect their small quantity of hashish, which has been prepared for them in advance. The Egyptian government is correct in its reasoning. Never could a sane state survive with its people using hashish. It produces neither good soldiers nor good citizens. Clearly, man is forbidden, under penalty of ruin and intellectual decline, to disrupt the primordial conditions of his existence, to disturb the equilibrium between his faculties and his surroundings. If ever a government wished to corrupt its citizens, it would only have to encourage the use of hashish. Gee golly. Isn't the next section on opium? Anyway, it is believed that hashish causes no physical harm. This is true enough, or at least no harm that has yet been recorded. For I am not sure to what extent we can say that a man is in perfect possession of his health when he is so far intoxicated as to be incapable of action, when he can do nothing but dream. For it is the human will of all faculties and the most precious that is attacked. A man who could instantaneously attain all of the riches of heaven and earth by swallowing a spoonful of paste would never acquire the 1,000th part by his own labors. One must, above all, live and work. It occurred to me to speak of wine and hashish in the same article because, indeed, they have something in common, the extraordinary amplifications of man's poetic nature. Man in all ages has shown a frantic taste for all substances, benign or dangerous, which exalt his personality and testify to his grandeur. He has always sought to revive his hopes, and he has always yearned for the infinite. But the consequences must be considered. On the one hand, we have a drink that stimulates digestion, fortifies the muscles, and enriches the blood. Even taken in great quantities, it will only cause slight disturbances. On the other hand, we have a substance that troubles the digestion, weakens the physical constitution, and may produce an intoxication that lasts for up to 24 hours. Wine exalts the will, hashish destroys it. Wine is physically beneficial, hashish is a suicidal weapon. You can definitely tell he's French right there. Yeah. Wine encourages benevolence and sociability, hashish isolates. One is industrious in the manner of speaking, and the other is especially indolent. What, indeed, is the use of working, laboring, writing, producing anything whatsoever, when paradise might be attained without the least effort? Finally, wine is for those people engaged in honest labor, those who are worthy of drinking it. Hashish is among the solitary pleasures, and is favored by miserable idlers. Wine is useful and produces fruitful results. Hashish is useless and dangerous. Fucking hypocrite. Section 7. Conclusion. I close this article with the comment of a remarkable little-known philosopher named Baudelaire, a musical theoretician at the professor at the conservatory. Seated next to him at a gathering in which several people had taken the enchanting potion. Poison, he said to me with a tone of ineffable scorn. I fail to understand why rational, reasoning man must employ artificial means to reach poetic bliss when he can, with enthusiasm, and will raise himself up to a supernatural existence. The great poets, philosophers, and prophets have all, by free and pure exercise of their will, succeeded in reaching a state in which they were at once cause and effect, subject and object, mesmerizer and somnambulist. There I completely agree. Baudelaire, you can't just say all that about wine and then say that about hashish. Hypocrite. But anyway, thank you for joining me tonight. That means we have finished the first article, or first essay rather, in Artificial Paradises, and either next week or the week after we will be moving on to Opium and Hashish, which, gee golly, that's gonna be fun. Anyway, I hope you have a chill, relaxed evening. Finish your tea, finish your wine, and cozy up and be safe. Signing off from your literary, philosophical doomer GF. Cheers.